Allen Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Coming up next on Political Soup, it's kind of an alphabet soup version today with the EPA, the IRS, the AP, a little AG. We may find some more to throw in there before we're done. Come back and join us, Crom Carmichael, and our special guest, Mike Pigott, coming up on Political Soup.
Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkapolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Talkapolis, the social media TV network for your city.
Political Soup is filmed in the Nashville, Tennessee Talkapolis studios, covering local, state, and national politics in 3 segments. Our host sits firmly in the center, mediating Crom Carmichael to his right and a new guest every week to his left as they discuss the pressing political issues at hand.
Well, welcome in, everybody, to Political Soup. I'm Joe Williams with 2 of my favorite people, one on each side. There's a reason I'm here. I'm going to play a little buffer zone, I think, before we're done. You all know Crom Carmichael, and our guest today, Mike Pigott from McNeely, Pigott, and Fox. Man, thank you for coming over.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I'm going to say this. Mike and I are probably going to agree a lot more today than we disagree. What we're talking about today, the story is continuing to evolve, but the implications of it run incredibly deep.
As crazy as the investigation into what happened in Benghazi has been, it has been a bit overshadowed the last couple of days by a couple of other things. Gentlemen, the admission by the Internal Revenue Service that despite their own policies, that they gave a stronger, harder, more in-depth look at organizations that applied for tax-exempt status if they thought they were right-wing, as I guess you could say, or more conservative, patriot, Tea Party kind of a group.
Limited government, teaching the Bill of Rights, teaching the Constitution.
Yeah, there's no need to teach the Constitution.
Anything like that got all this scrutiny. But it goes so much deeper, Joe, than just the scrutiny. First of all, there were 300 of them that applied. 25 of them ended up just dropping out. 125 still have not been approved. This is over 2 years. So this is the IRS obstructing the political process, because these groups applied for non-tax-exempt status so that they could then raise money and participate in the political process. Let's just look at the First Amendment of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, which we'll get to in a little bit, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress. Now, Glenn Beck was on this morning talking about it took him months to get his permit to have his program in Washington. It doesn't take liberal groups months and hundreds of permits and all these other things. This is pure, utter obstruction. Now, that's on just one level. Then, look at what else they did. They then asked for all of this information that is unlawful to ask for. They can't ask for donor lists, but they asked and said, you're not going to be approved unless you tell us who your donors are from the beginning. In some cases, they asked for board minutes of every board meeting the organization had since inception. Now, so it's the abuse of the process, not just, I made a couple of mistakes, a couple of low-level employees. That's BS. That didn't come from a couple of low-level employees. That came from on high. I don't know where, but it came from a lot higher than a couple of people in Cincinnati. So let's go a little further. Then the IRS, we now learn, took the information, and by the way, your Internal Revenue Service, when you turn in your taxes, that's supposed to be private. That is supposed to be private information. Now, wait a minute.
Believe that.
They then gave it to left-wing organizations that then disseminated it, and Obama himself named some of the people in the campaign and called them bad people, called them evil, and all these different terms. I don't know if that was the exact word, but it was one guy out in Utah that gave money to Romney, and Obama kept naming him as a really bad person. They audited him twice. They did all kinds of stuff to him. And this is the abuse of the process. Now, let me take it one step further, and then, Mike, you can jump in here. Here's what going forward is the problem. Under Obamacare, if you apply for a subsidy, one of the 3 parts of the federal government that approves your application is the IRS. The other is Homeland Security, and the other is the Social Security system. And by the way, the questionnaire that they ask you is an in-depth questionnaire, all kinds of private information, public information that you would not want other people to know about. And now we know that the IRS leaks information for political purposes. And so this is a big time scandal, and this dwarfs. Let me just read real quickly here. The second article in Nixon's impeachment, the charges were that he endeavored to obtain from the IRS confidential information contained in income tax returns for the purposes not authorized by law, and to cause in violation of the constitutional rights of the citizens income tax audits and other income tax investigations to be initiated or conducted in a discriminatory manner. That's all he did.
Okay, the name has finally come up. The ghost is back from '72. We've just attached the Obama administration to the Nixon administration.
It's rare for Crom to bring that topic up, but it fits his purpose well here. I agree with almost everything he's had to say. I think the First Amendment doesn't give somebody the right to not-for-profit status, obviously, but the IRS has admitted that they did this. I mean, they've fessed up to it, and they did it, and it's just as wrong for them to do this as if a Republican administration had done it to the ACLU. What's wrong is wrong, you know, and there's no justification for it, and heads need to roll. An apology isn't good enough.
Well, not just heads needs to roll. Let's remember, under Nixon, a bunch of people did the perp walk and went to prison for years. And there are going to be some people here who need to go to prison for years. And they may bump up and say, you know what, you may put me in prison for a little bit, but let me tell you who told me to do this. Because it's going to go higher than 2 or 3 people in Cincinnati. And by the way, we now know it's 4 offices across the country, not just a couple of them in Cincinnati.
Are we back to the great line that our own Fred Thompson brought us? What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if they can take the trail that high, I agree with Crom that it goes higher than where it is right now. Now, whether or not it goes all the way to the White House, I have my doubts, but we'll see.
I don't have doubts whether it goes to the White House. I don't know exactly where it goes to the White House, but let me say this. We're going to be talking about the EPA. It was doing the same thing. The IRS is doing the same thing. Catherine Sebelius, we now know, is doing the same thing. And so when you have a systemic problem, this is not a little thing here or a little thing there. This is systemic. And when it is systemic, it goes all the way to the top. It goes all the way to the top. Obama is responsible for the people that work in his administration. And when they're that crooked, and crooked is the right word here, these are crooks. These are people who are doing criminal things that goes to the heart of our democracy.
Did you expect anything different out of Chicago?
No. To be honest with you,
right.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you have, in the last 20 years, there have been 1,700 public officials in Chicago that have been sentenced to prison. 1,700 public officials.
I'd say they have a problem.
It is a corrupt culture there, and that's the culture that Obama came from.
You mentioned the EPA. They're on roll again.
Oh, well, here it is right here. This is the EPA. This is where people ask for waivers or ask for information, and this was so systemic. You had the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is a well-known and highly thought-of institute that provides information to the public, writes press releases, and does a bunch of things to disseminate information. They were denied information 93% of the time.
From the EPA?
From the EPA, where they were making a public request.
Why?
Because the EPA, well, they're corrupt.
Did they give an excuse? Did they give a reason?
Well, I suppose they gave a reason. It doesn't matter. They're trying to claim that the CEI doesn't deserve to get the information. They claim that they're not in the public interest. They came up with all these different reasons. But what we now know is also from this report is that 95% of the time the opposing side got the information that they requested. So I mean, it's like, Mike, I don't like you, and I'm the government, and I realize that you might have a right to information, but since I don't like you, I'm not going to give it to you. I don't have to. But I like this person over here, and I'm going to give them all the information they want. Well, that's not what the law says, and this is the key. The EPA doesn't get to pick and choose, and they are breaking the law. And so this is another example of somebody, and Obama's going to say, oh, I read about it in the paper. I didn't ever hear about it. I've been on the golf course.
Well, you don't think this has gone on before in government where an agency has a point of view or an agency doesn't like somebody and so they don't share as much information with them as they do with somebody else? This isn't some grand revelation that this kind of thing could go on in a government agency. In this case, I'll plead ignorance. I don't know very much about what the EPA has been doing in this case. It doesn't sound good, but on the other hand, to pretend that this has all come up since Obama's been in office, this has gone on for years in all kinds of administrations and all kinds of agencies.
And when Richard Nixon did it, not only was he impeached, but a bunch of people went to prison. And who walked across Pennsylvania Avenue and told him, excuse me, he wasn't impeached, he resigned.
Right.
Who walked across and said, if you don't resign, we're going to throw you out of office, we're going to impeach you? It wasn't the Democrats, it was the Republicans. It was his own party that says you have let the country down. So, yes, you're right, Mike, it has gone on in the past, and there have been penalties for it. And now it's going on again, and this, frankly, is worse because it is so pervasive. It is so pervasive.
And if it is, then and somebody really did something criminal, but you have all these arrows pointing to criminal activity, and yet nobody's been charged criminally. This has a long way to play out, and it may play out that way. But I'm just saying, let's not jump to conclusions.
What'll be interesting is to see if Eric Holder does charge people criminally, because I think it was Nixon. I think that before Nixon there was not a law to allow for a special prosecutor or special counsel that operated out from under the Attorney General, other than you could fire him, like what Nixon did on Saturday Night Massacre. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and so now, but that law has been repealed. So whether or not there'll be a special counsel or not,
right.
I don't even know what the mechanism for it. But it'll be interesting to see, because if Holder just says, "Oh, you're fired for doing that, and you're fired for doing that," and that's all it is, then that'll be, to me, indicative that he is part of the cover-up. Because what the IRS did is let me put it this way: if what they're reported to have done, if Nixon was impeached over it and people went to jail for it, what they've done now is just as bad, if not worse.
In fairness to some of these, as we go to break, Mike, you're right. This is not anything new. It's not just federal level. Personally, I've seen it at state, local levels too, across the country. So a lot of it does depend. Sometimes it's just a little more.
A lot of it
unfortunately
stinks.
obvious.
I'll agree with them. Some of this stuff just appears to stink, but let's not carry it to the criminal level yet. Let's let it play out and see if that really happens.
Well, here's what we do know. One thing we do know now is that the IRS did leak information to left-wing groups that then disseminated it to the Huffington Post and a bunch of other media outlets that then reported things about people that were not accurate. Okay?
Now, did the IRS admit that? Who's saying that?
I'll have to talk about that on another show. But I mean, It's in these articles here as to where it came from, and I don't think the fact that they leaked it is in doubt. Who directed them to leak it is not known yet, but whether they leaked it or not is not in doubt. And the only point I'm making here is that this goes to me. This is so much bigger. This is why it's so much bigger. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the forms that people have to fill out to apply for a subsidy. They are incredible. And at the bottom of the form, it says, on penalty of perjury, every statement I have made is accurate. Now, and then a bunch of the questions are stuff that, frankly, you have to be a lawyer to understand what they're asking. Now, so having said that, when the IRS gets all your health information, access to all your health information, and they've got your tax information, think of the damage that they can do to people that politically they don't like. So we need to have people who are crushed, who've been involved in doing this kind of stuff. This is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. If they leaked your information or my information or anybody else's information, those people don't have a right to do that.
Aren't they almost better off granting the not-for-profit status, and then all that stuff becomes public record anyway.
No, it doesn't. A not-for-profit does not have to show their donors. Does not have to show their donors.
They got to show their books, though.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't. They do not have to show their donors.
No, but they have to show their books, their income, that it came in and where it went. They don't have to say where it came from.
That's correct. They do not have to show their donors.
Okay.
And the IRS has no right to ask for it. That itself is illegal.
Just remember one thing, folks. The IRS got out of this simply by saying, we're sorry.
Yeah.
So, come April 15th of next year, let me go ahead and get mine in.
Yeah, write a note.
Yeah. Hey, Austin, Texas, your service center, I'm sorry. Okay. As they come to bring the handcuffs to take me out of here, we're going to get ready for the next segment. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Mike Pigott and Crom Carmichael here on Political Soup.
All in Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Political Soup is filmed in the Nashville, Tennessee Talkapolis studios, covering local, state and national politics in 3 segments. Our host sits firmly in the centre, mediating Crom Carmichael to his right and a new guest every week to his left as they discuss the pressing political issues at hand.
Welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. Crom Carmichael, Mike Pigott, Joe Williams. I don't matter. These are the guys who have the answers. I'm just the guy in the middle. Trying to bring a little common sense, but sometimes my sense ain't that common. Mike, one of the big things that we've seen this week, and I'm going to let you lead off this segment. Crom got last one. We're going to let you lead off here. One of the things we've been following this week, there was a bill that went through the state legislature somehow and got to the governor's desk about reporting potential animal abuse. Everybody loves animals. Nobody wants to see an animal abused. You should report animal abuse. The governor vetoed the bill, failed to sign it. Now, I'm not sure I necessarily disagree with him either, but help me understand, because I have just a nominal knowledge. Help me understand the bill.
Well, it's an interesting issue in that this past session and the recent sessions haven't had that much drama to them. You've got a Republican governor, Republican House and Senate, and so there's not a lot of fighting and bickering and big issues that are just firefights across the floors of the houses. But this issue was interesting in that it was brought very cleverly, I thought, the way this thing was crafted, in a way that it appeared on its surface to be protecting animals and calling upon people to report what they know, and if they've recorded any video recordings or tape recordings of animal abuse, that they had 48 hours to turn it in, or they would be prosecuted by the government.
Well, that tells me I'm not going to turn. If I see it, I'm probably not going to turn it in because it may take me more than 48 hours.
Well, you're not going to videotape.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you're not going to record it.
So right. I think what I heard you say, Mike, is you have to have a record of it. But if you only see it, do you have to turn it in if you see it? You have to report it if you see it?
Because the news media got really antsy about this. They've been real antsy this past week for a lot of reasons.
Okay.
But they got antsy about this because their knowledge of a tape, or if they did the taping themselves, obviously, they were also called upon to reveal this. Well, if they wanted to go to press on Sunday and it's Monday when they got it, and they didn't want to give it to anybody because they're protecting their sources, they're protecting their story, then they could have been prosecuted. And so this had all kinds of ramifications where on the surface it sounded like the advocates for the bill were trying to get to the heart of the problem within 48 hours and get that person prosecuted and get the record out there. The realities of it are, the practicalities are, that this thing was designed to cut back on the number of people willing to put themselves out there, record things, because there were too many risks involved in trying to report it. And then the animal rights people mostly, but a lot of other folks too, including district attorneys, all sorts of groups across the state, came out against this bill because of some of the problems it created for prosecutors, problems it created certainly for animal lovers. The governor's office said he hadn't gotten this many calls on any issue since he's been in office, and he vetoed it.
Well, a couple of things. One is, didn't this start because of I think it was the walking horse, the soaring or whatever it is that they call it, where they.
Well, that certainly is brought up every time, and whether it was brought up to protect somebody like that, which is what it appears to me to have been.
No, wait, what? But if you know about it, doesn't this bill say you have to turn it in?
Well, I don't believe that guy's in prison now.
Okay.
But he wasn't in prison because of anything that happened in 48 hours. And in this case, if they had done exactly what they did, I believe that he would be walking the streets today, and the person who didn't turn it in 48 hours would be in jail.
Okay. So you think the bill might have been well-intentioned, but if it had passed, would have almost exactly the opposite effect from what was intended.
I agree with you on B. I'm not sure I agree that it was well-intentioned. I think some people voted for it thinking it was well-intentioned.
Well, I mean, everybody's against animal cruelty.
Well, but it sounds like a Trojan horse bill is what it sounds like.
Right, it is. I think it was, and I think it was crafted that way on purpose. And it could have been fixed when the protests started back during the session. Now, there have been plenty of protests since the session ended and the bill passed. But this objection was raised all along, and they stuck to their guns and kept the 48 hours in there, and I think that was a pretty good indication of what they were trying to do.
If you're trying to stop animal cruelty and to identify those people who perpetuate and engage in it,
right.
How would you, because you understand the legislature and the process a lot better than I do, how would you have changed that bill and crafted it to get the result that I think the people, the animal rights people would want? Let's put it that way.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have had any kind of criminal penalties against the people making the report.
Okay.
I think that it's tough enough to come forward as a citizen and report something that's wrong, especially if it involves a neighbor or you're working for somebody.
Okay.
You might have to report on your boss. And also, I think that the time limit is unreasonable. It should be the same as the statute of limitations on other crimes, that if you know something, certainly we would hope that you would report it as soon as possible to stop animal cruelty from happening tomorrow or the next day.
Right.
But not hold you to the standard where if you don't get in 48 hours, it's tough. We can't prosecute that guy, but we're going to prosecute you for knowing about it and not telling us sooner.
So do you think that next year, in the next session, if some of the people who supported the bill were actually trying to curtail animal abuse, do you think they'll come back with another bill?
Well, maybe. It seems to me we already have laws against animal cruelty.
Okay.
And so why not just toughen the penalties for that and leave it alone?
Okay.
And the governor said, let's take another look at this next year, but I hope they don't even do that. I hope that they just did what I described and this crack down on animal cruelty. If it's not a stiff enough penalty to deter people from doing it, then make it tougher.
Okay.
But somebody's serving time right now for it, so it's not that easy.
Okay.
Interesting part of this, if I remember our discussion earlier, this bill came out of the West State in an area that is rural, farm, animal-centric. I mean, that's what
Sure.
they do up through there.
In fact, that's what the House sponsor of the bill does. He's a farmer.
And yet, he went along with,
Well,
I call it
he
Trojan horse
sponsored-
bill.
he sponsored
He
it.
sponsors it. I mean,
Right.
he's good with it.
And I don't have any indication whatsoever that he was trying to feather his own nest or cover up anything he was
Oh, yeah.
doing. But on the other hand, he is a farmer, and there tended to be a lot of farm interests who were for this bill.
I'd say I'm surprised by that. Terribly surprised by that.
Well, it's a way of stifling whistleblowers, and if you're in the business that's getting the whistle blown on you, and there have been some pretty high-profile cases of that recently, then maybe it was a case where people who were perfectly legitimate businessmen were tired of being cast in with the others. But it certainly was a bad bill. It got a lot of support from the farmers, and luckily the governor vetoed it. I think it was a good decision on his part. Only the second bill he's vetoed since being governor, and he's been coming to the end of his first term.
I know I have several friends who are in the walking horse industry, and their big complaint has been the legitimate ones, trainers and farmers, et cetera, being thrown in with the bad guys. There was a point there if you said, hey, I'm into walking horses, you're one of those.
Yeah, yeah.
The other half on
Which
this,
is- Which is not good.
no. And the other half on this bill is, if you've got somebody coming up trying to make a career out of something, they got 48 hours to decide, do I do this? Because if they're right, everybody hates them. If they're wrong, everybody hates them. Once they make that allegation, they're out of the career, they're out of that business forever. The industry will turn their back on them.
Well, now, let me ask a question, because I know that they have the celebration down in Shelbyville every year, and I guess that's the biggest walking horse show on the
world,
planet.
yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And if somebody in the walking horse business knows that one of their competitors is cheating, do they turn them in? What do they do? I don't know. What do they do?
Well, when I was a reporter years ago, many centuries ago, I did some stories about this issue, about cruelty to walking horses. And a lot of the calls, I learned over time that a lot of the calls I was getting were anonymous calls from competitors or somebody they wanted out of that competition.
Wow.
And so you have to get to the motive too, and that gets a little bit tricky. You don't know what's a legitimate. Some of those things were legitimate and they were pursued by the authorities, and there were people thrown out of the business and prosecuted and so on. But I got to the point where I had to always look at the ulterior motive for somebody calling. Were they calling about their own farm? Sometimes I get calls from somebody who worked at the farm and they were just reporting what was going on there. And usually those were legit. If it came from a competing horse farm or somebody else who's, so the horse involved happened to be the favorite to win the whole thing, then you start wondering what's really going on. It always seemed to happen around that time of year, too.
Oh, yeah. I don't know this for a fact. My understanding is, though, that especially after some of the really bad publicity's come down in the last 3-4 years, that many of the legitimate trainers, if they have an idea, that they have a colleague, they kind of go and take care of it with that colleague themselves.
Okay.
Self-police. Yeah, basically self-policing.
Okay,
yeah.
that's okay.
Now,
Interesting.
how much of that works and how much does?
So under this law, they'd have to turn them in.
Yeah.
They couldn't go self-police. They'd have to go turn them in.
Well, within 48 hours.
Yeah, I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah. And 48 hours, folks, is not a long time.
No, it's twice 24.
What wisdom. He has understanding and now great wisdom. Okay, we're not going to be gone 48 hours, but when we come back, we'll wrap up this edition of Political Soup. Stay with us.
Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkapolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Political Soup is filmed in the Nashville, Tennessee Talkapolis studios, covering local, state, and national politics in 3 segments. Our host sits firmly in the center, mediating Crom Carmichael to his right and a new guest every week to his left as they discuss the pressing political issues at hand.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. I swear, next time, we're going to leave the cameras and the mics rolling while you're off doing something else. I'm Joe Williams, along with Mike Pigott and Crom Carmichael. And gentlemen, we've had the IRS issue where they've explained they did some things they probably should not have done. They're not the only ones. The United States Department of Justice has admitted now that they've been going after phone records. It's, part of an investigative piece, you'd think, for the DOJ, only they went after the phone records of reporters for the Associated Press. Now there's an issue. You're an old reporter.
Right, very old. And I don't think this should be allowed. I think that you're really skating into a dangerous area when you start going after the records of news organizations. Those are protected under other laws that are out there, and if there's a source that's speaking from the CIA or somewhere else to reporters, then they have every right to go after who that is and try to get to the source of it. But one of the ways to get there is not to go taking protected records of a news organization and using those to get there.
Crom, who heads the DOJ?
The Department of Justice?
Yeah.
Eric Holder?
The Attorney
He's
General.
the Attorney
This
General.
is the guy who shipped the guns to Mexico. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay. Well, I'm looking here. This is an interesting story for me because of how you can kind of spread it out and link it to some other things. But here's what the president of the AP said: there can be no possible justification for such an overbroad collection of telephone communications of the Associated Press and its reporters. These records potentially reveal communications with confidential sources across all of the news gathering activities undertaken by the AP during a 2-month period. Blah, blah, blah. Okay? Now, I don't know if Eric Holder has said that he made the decision to do this, but my guess is he's going to try to say somebody else made the decision to do it, because this is the way this administration works. Then they go on though, and they say this is what the department, this is the Justice Department, says it might impair the news gathering function, and that is bad because the government recognizes that, quote, freedom of the press can be no broader than the freedom of reporters to investigate and report the news. Now, I will tell you that coming from the Obama administration, saying that there's some constitutional right is kind of funny, because just as we've talked about on the IRS and these other things, the right to privacy, out the window. The right to petition the government, out the window. The right to freedom of speech to raise money so that you can participate in politics, out the window. They've already been attacking the Second Amendment. So I just find it to be humorous that the Justice Department, that apparently, and as you point out, that gun running operation, I don't think anybody was arrested and indicted for that. And you had a dead American from that. But it's just, I just find it humorous that the Justice Department is saying that they recognize the importance of the freedom of the press.
Well, they certainly don't when they go and grab all these phone records.
Of course.
Now, the reporter, it doesn't make the reporter free from any consequences. There have been plenty of reporters that have gone to prison, but that wasn't after the government came in and seized a bunch of private records that were in their possession and said, these are ours now, and all the people that you were protecting here, the hell with them. This is pretty serious. This is very serious, what has happened here.
Do you think is it a matter of just being overzealous, or is it a matter of arrogance?
Well, I think it goes to arrogance and beyond. This is very calculated. You don't just happen into the AP office and pick up how many months of, was it 18 months?
18 months or something.
18 months of phone records for all these different reporters in a big news organization like that, which serves virtually every paper and news outlet.
Yeah, and that's a great
conservative
point.
And liberal.
Yeah.
Serves all these different organizations. Nobody did that without thinking, and nobody did that without a whole lot of checking around first. And they made a conscious decision to do it.
And let me say this, I agree with everything Mike just said, which adds to the argument or the position that it is systemic. What happened here with the AP is not in isolation. Let's look what the IRS was doing. Let's look what Catherine Sebelius is doing, a shakedown cruise. She's calling up executives and asking them to donate to organizations that will promote and manage Obamacare. Well, what are you going to say to the Secretary of Health and Human Services who has all this regulatory power over your company? No. I mean, that's just, it's outrageous. But it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here. It is Chicago. It is Chicago. This is the way they do things in Chicago.
Well, 1,800 people haven't been removed from office or prosecuted. Again, you're getting way ahead. You're connecting all the dots, and that's your prerogative, your opinion. But I personally, you and I agree on this issue. What they did in this case was really wrong. Some of these other cases, I tend to think that there's a lot staking there that's going to be investigated further. But that doesn't mean it's all related, that it all goes to the top and everybody's going to prison.
I didn't say everybody. I'm saying some people need to go to prison. I mean, let's look, Mike. Do you think that what the administration did under the Labor Board or whatever it was to Boeing, do you think that was justified in saying that they can't open a plant in South Carolina? And because they're, my position is the union thugs that run the union out in Seattle put leverage on the Obama administration to do that. And I think, I don't know whether or not they ended up getting beat in court or exactly what it was, but the National Labor Relations Board now is getting killed every time it goes to court. So you've got a bunch of radicals on the Labor Relations Board trying to impose unions and beat up employers and all this other stuff. And I'm just saying, Mike, this is across, I can't think of a single regulatory part of the Obama administration that isn't, I mean, food stamps, what are they trying, they're out promoting food stamps. They're giving prizes and rewards to states that increase the number of people on food stamps. Is that what we want as a country, to have as many people on food stamps as possible? I'm just saying, you look across everything they're doing. I'm going to say it is systemic, and I think that the evidence will bear it out over time.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, and I hope that the guys that are doing the bad things at AP, I hope they go to prison.
As a man in the middle, I'll tell you this. I'm not sure I'm ready to call it strictly systemic. And I'm not sure if it was just a mistake or how bad it really is. But I got to tell you, I've seen a couple of excerpts from speeches by the president about, you'll hear people screaming about, from behind every tree and every stone, screaming about tyranny. Don't listen to that. I got to tell you, I'm beginning to listen to that, because this is getting to be a little far-fetched to not have some kind of legs to it.
Well, I'm certainly not against scrutiny. I think that if this stuff is scrutinized and they find nothing, or if they find a lot, let them have at it. That's how government is supposed to work.
Exactly.
That's how the media is supposed to work, is to help get to the bottom of this. And I think in some of these cases they're trying to do that. But there's certainly a bad wind blowing when they start grabbing reporters' records and without any cause whatsoever.
And that's why I asked, do you think it was just an oversight, overzealousness, or arrogance? Because if it was arrogance, then yeah, I'm more worried than maybe I was.
Well, I do. I
think
think it was arrogance, and there's no way something like that just happens.
I was hoping you confirmed what I was expecting and hoping not to believe. It is a frightening thought, gentlemen. Good 3 segments. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Hope
Thank
we'll
you.
see you back
All
more
right.
often.
Thank you.
Crom, as always.
We'll see you again soon.
You two get together and I learn stuff. I just sit here in the middle and look stupid. However, looking stupid is something I do well, so I do it as often as I can. We'll see you next time on Political Soup.